and welcome to Turkey Courier. I am Sarp Duyar, and on the other side of the microphone is Erkin Erguney. We'll be talking about news related to Turkish politics and economics. Hi Erkin.
Hi Sarp.
This week we again have a bunch of interesting topics to cover. But first up, it is the current status of Turkish Lira. This has been an ongoing trend for both the Turkish Lira and our show, that the Turkish Lira just keeps dipping and dipping and dipping. Is there going to be an end to it? What do you think, Erkin?
So thank you for the initiation, first of all. Turkish Lira has been falling off the cliff for almost 2 years now, almost maybe 3 years now. And since the start of 2020, it has lost more than 30% of its value. And this is not a new thing for Turkish people. This is creating a bunch of problems that we talked about in the previous episodes. It is making imports much more expensive for Turkish people. And if you think about that, most of the things that we use in Turkey are based on imports. Like we do not produce a lot of things that Turkish consumers would like to buy, like cars, electronics, etc. It is affecting the life in a very drastic manner. We are not seeing the effects of it in terms of like foreign travel at the moment because of the COVID crisis, but still, this is a big effect. This has a big effect on Turkish population in general. I don't see an end to it because there are a lot of systemic problems in Turkish economy in terms of like current account deficit and the fact that we are importing much more than we are exporting. And there is also this policy enacted by Erdogan government that they really like to keep interest rates low to get higher growth, but that this comes with the expense. This comes with the expense of having a more volatile domestic currency. I don't see an end to it in terms, since it does not have systemic change that we require to have. For example, investor sentiment, international investor sentiment towards Turkey and Turkish lira in general is decreasing day by day because they do not trust the Erdogan government's hold on the Turkish economy. They do not see the shift away from democracy as a positive development. And Turkey, Ankara has not been changing this attitude much. And we can see this manifested in terms of CDS, credit default swaps, which just basically measures the likelihood of a country defaulting on its debts. And this rate has been increasing. The more it increases, the more it means that investors believe that the country will default. So I do not see an end in sight unless there is a significant shift in terms of economic policies.
All right. I think I asked this last week, but then comes a big question. How long can the Erdogan's government hold on to the current way of handling economics? Do you think the regime at one point will fail to endure the pressures, both internal and external, against the economy and the currency?
So theoretically, there should come a point of failure after which they will not be able to continue the current set of policies. But we are living in strange times, and as we also know, the policy making scene is not only about the economics, it's also involved with politics. And Erdogan government has been involved in a lot of foreign entanglements, like we talked about last week, like Karabakh, and this week we're going to talk about Cyprus and all these sort of things. And this is creating all sorts of sentiments domestically in Turkey. So I think in terms of like viability of policy in the long term, it does not only involve in economics. I think if I would be a sane politician, a sane policymaker in Turkey, I would still try to look for a way to shift away from this policymaking principle, because it is clearly not delivering the development objectives and the prosperity needs of our country. But I think it is very much dependent on the conjunctural changes, like how the global global economy will shift to, there'll be a shift into a like deep recession due to the COVID-19 crisis. If that happens, Turkey will have no way but to default and like change economic policy making. But if the outlook on global economics shift for the better, we might actually be able to hold a little while longer.
Well, the currency issue has been an ongoing debate, not a debate, but a topic that we cover. But let's move on to a more recent crisis, Karabakh. Last week, we had our very initial coverage of the situation there. And this week, as we have said previous week, the military approaches by the Azerbaijani government have been slowed due to geography of the region. It is quite mountainous, and it is very hard to have a successful offensive in mountainous terrain. So do you think Azerbaijani government will be able to keep up the offensive for too long, but at the same time being able to sneak under the international community's gaze?
Well, that's a good point to ponder on, I think. I think as I said last week, I think Azerbaijani government was expecting less of an international gaze upon the area after so many years. But I think they miscalculated on that. Like now everyone has been fixed on Karabakh issue. Like a lot of Americans are learning what Azerbaijan is and where Azerbaijan is located, and is that even a thing? And I think that was a miscalculation, but still, I think it might change for better of Azerbaijan's policies. So we have a lot of interesting things upcoming, like for example, the American elections due to happen in November. I think it's supposed to take away the shift the gaze away from Karabakh issue. So I think they might have more of an independent gameplay area in which they can operate. But I think Karabakh is a mountainous region, as demonstrated in Nagorno-Karabakh denomination. Like Nagorno in Russian means mountainous. And as far as I can see from Azerbaijani army's outreach in the region, it has been minimal. And upcoming season is winter. And we all know what winter is like in mountainous regions. It will be hard to navigate. It will be hard to advance. And what the Azerbaijani army was initially planning, I don't know for that what they were planning for sure, but I think they will not be able to reach it. They won't be able to invade Karabakh. They won't be able to advance much. That makes me think that they might have some other things at mind, and or maybe they just like failing to reach to whatever they're planning to have. I think this might be due to like Azerbaijan trying to say we are also present here, we're still present because Azerbaijan is much richer than Armenia, and because it has like a lot of petrodollars, it has a lot of petroleum resources. But I think it will not reach the end that is coveted to have. So I think they will be much more likely to prove a point, because it seems to me that they won't be able to finalize and materialize the plans that they had in mind, basically.
All right. What I see is Armenia is hoping to hold out until the international community's watchful eyes are fixed on the situation, because they know that on a prolonged conflict, Armenia doesn't have that much of a resources to fight back against Azerbaijan, especially since that Turkey is their neighbor and they're pretty much landlocked if you don't count Georgia, which also has some sort of a beef, at least a minimal one, with Armenia. My question is now then, do you think Armenia is more inclined to negotiate and settle this issue on the table, or do you think they're counting on Russian support instead and hoping that they can achieve what they want, not on the table but on the field?
Well, I think Armenia does not have such a thing in their minds. First of all, let me correct something. They also have Iran. Armenia is one of the most important partners is Iran, because they have the southern corridor connecting to Iran. And I think that's also one of the big issues why Armenia is taking this very seriously. Because Armenia's connection with Iran is very important for Armenia, because they provide one of the two only possible pathways for goods allocation, goods provision, and basically connection to the entire world. Because Iran, along with Georgia, is the only two countries that do not have closed borders with Armenia. Turkey and Azerbaijan have their borders closed, so they're actually a no-go zone for Armenian goods, Armenian trade, Armenian commerce, and whatever else. So basically, what I would expect from Azerbaijan to have in mind in terms of like strategic planning would be to connect the Republic of Nakhchivan, which borders Turkey, to connect with Azerbaijan. And that would mean essentially to be blocking, cutting off the connection between Iran and Armenia. And that would mean Armenia would only have one country, that is Georgia, to have its connection with the world. And that would be much of a risk to any modern states that we know of. Like as a modern state, you would try to diversify the ways in which you would reach the modern world. So I think that is one of the reasons why, like I would want to correct that. Apart from that, I think the reason why they're not counting on Russian support is due to the Russian entanglement with Turkey in terms of alliances and like kind of general enmity between the two countries. Russia, for example, last week announced their foreign state spokesman announced that their mutual defense treaty that they have with Armenia does not include the region of Karabakh, because Karabakh is not a region in which that is included in the international area count as Armenia. International community still sees Republic of Karabakh, Artsakh in Armenian, as an invaded part of Azerbaijan, and also the other parts in between. So they said the mutual treaty does not include that. So I think Armenia will also kind of expect that they will meet a similar fate as did Greece with the Eastern Mediterranean. You should remember that like Greece was counting on NATO and European Union help to finalize and conclude the conflict in the Eastern Mediterranean, but these institutions did not provide the help that they coveted, and now they are trying to settle on the table with Turkey. But I think Armenia would not be able to settle on the table, because we should remember that these two countries do not have a great track record of solving things on the table. These countries, however much we would like to envision them, they are not very much modern in the sense that we think of modern states. They will be very, very much likely to solve the thing on the field, on the military aspect of the whole entanglement. And I don't think the Karabakh issue will be resolved with this conflict as well, unless there's a big incursion into Armenia by Azerbaijan, because I don't expect the opposite happening from Armenian side. So I don't see much likelihood of resolving the conflict at this point, unless Azerbaijan makes a big offensive and retakes the parts that it claims that to be under the invasion of Armenia. But that also doesn't seem likely.
I agree. This leads me into two thoughts. One is the potential Azerbaijani strategy of using the Armenian side's attrition against them, because despite the fact that in such an offensive Azerbaijan takes more casualties, it has the resources to replenish those casualties, whereas you look at the Armenian side and they lose at least as much of very expensive equipment as the Azerbaijani side. Their pockets are not deep enough to replenish those casualties. So what I could imagine is a very dragged out war that deprive Armenian side of fighting capabilities. What do you think about that? Or do you think such a dragged out war is untenable?
Well, yeah, I mean, when we're saying that Azerbaijan is much more powerful in terms of like monetary resources, etc., in comparison to Armenia, we should also think that like these are Caucasian, like South Caucasian states, and they do not have much power to begin with. I think such a dragged war will be untenable for both sides, but it will be much more untenable for Armenia, as you were saying. And also, if we take the lens of Azerbaijan at this point, they should be efficient in terms of time, of the time window that they will have due to these like global developments like the US elections, etc. So if they won't be able to resolve the conflict in their way as they envision in the time required, so for example, however much of a time window that like the US elections would provide, if they won't be able to resolve it within that time frame, then they would be under immense pressure. There might be even sanctions or embargoes, etc. But I do not see it likely due to the initial successes of the Azerbaijani army. I would expect them to perform better. This is in quotation marks in comparison to Armenian army. But then I don't see this very likely, and it seems the conflict is due to go on for much longer.
And my second train of thought was about the Minsk group, which was formed 30 years ago when the initial conflict happened. And according to Minsk Accords, Azerbaijan held a corridor, a very narrow corridor that connects Nakhchivan to its mainland on the very southern tip of Armenia, which, as you said, in such a case, would close off the Armenian border to Iran. Now, the important aspect of this is that Azerbaijan feels the need or like wants a connection to its territory at Nakhchivan, because any reasonable, sane, modern state would do so, and doing so would either cut off Armenia from Artsakh or from Iran. So in that regard, I don't think Minsk group actually solves one of the main concerns of Armenia. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, yes, I agree. Minsk group of OSCE is basically a group that is very much ineffective on the international relations, because we should think of this in terms of historical evidence. So the groups that were formed after the dissolution of Soviet Union were all ineffective, both in Balkans, both in Caucasus, both in Yugoslavia, since they did not have a military force on the field that could enforce what they have been advocating. And this was the case in Balkans, for example. So they can only provide some diplomatic pressure, but in reality, you need some force on the field to enforce what you have been saying to people. So the corridor idea between Nakhchivan and Azerbaijan is basically an untenable position, because we should also understand this from the lens of looking from Armenian side, because Armenia knows that like relations with Turkey will not improve because they tried and it didn't work. Like probably the relations with Azerbaijan is also not going to work. So they see it as some sort of existential threat, as they're rightly to do so. Because for a country to have only one connection to the outside world is a very untenable position. Like all international trade, etc., will be connected to Georgia, because they would know for sure that they will not have any land connection with the sea or the outer world unless with Georgia. So this corridor would not be tenable without Azerbaijan showing that it is vastly superior to Armenia in terms of military. But that should also create many more problems, because Armenia sees this, rightly so, as an existential threat. So OSCE's position is also very shaky at this point. The time will show if they will be present on the field with some military resources. If they would do so, they might be able to actually enforce their thesis. But then I don't see this very likely, because OSCE has been ineffective in terms of stopping the conflict in Southern Caucasus before.
Now moving on to a region of at least considerably better weather, Eastern Mediterranean. Things are cooling off between Greece and Turkey, and both sides seem to be more inclined to negotiate. What's your take on this? What is the background that you see that made this happen?
First of all, let me briefly tell our audience what I've been thinking when I see the Turkish foreign policy making. Turkey was never this powerful on military side. Now that it has quite a big infrastructure of military capabilities, it has been flexing its muscles in the region for a while now, for the last 5 years or so. And it has providing a new pathway for Turkish policymakers to solve all the problems. So for example, Cyprus has been a big problem in terms of blocking Turkey's accession to the EU, European Union. And also, for example, the region of Karabakh and the fact that our borders are close with Armenia has been also big problems in terms of international relations. These problems prove to be unsolvable on the table, at least that we can think so after so many years. Like since the invasion of Cyprus, it has been 40 years or so, and we did not open our borders since 1990s with Armenia. So I think what Turkish policymakers are thinking right now is that they can solve these problems with the military, and they can enforce what they have been thinking, and then at least arrive to a more optimal solution for everyone, maybe. So I think that is essentially what comes into mind with the entanglement with Greece. So what Greece has been hoping was to achieve that, like, but to get NATO support and EU support for Eastern Mediterranean dispute with Turkey. But they weren't able to get this. There were a lot of like systemic reasons behind this with the European Union. So for example, for any foreign decision that has to be taken from the EU has to be taken unanimously. Every member state of the EU has to agree on the foreign decision. And this creates a lot of problems because there are 27 member states, and whatever they desire from the international arena is different. So Turkey, I think, has seen through this disadvantage on the EU side and has been using it to its advantage, because Ankara decides something and it's able to implement it. But for EU, for Brussels to decide something, it is much more difficult than any decision taken by Ankara. So I think Greece has also seen through this, and now they were agreeing to sit on a table with Turkey, and this will be, I think, on Turkey's terms, because Turkey and the international community has seen that Greece was unable to fulfill what it has been saying. But this also comes with some other disadvantages for Turkey. So for example, Turkey has tried this once, and we don't know for sure that it's going to be successful or not. But now European Union must have seen what Turkey's strategy is, and they will probably adapt to it soon enough. For example, France has been a vocal critic of Turkey's foreign policy in the region, and I think it will try to find a way to kind of streamline the process of foreign policy making for its advantage. So like France will be able to act, I think, in the future against anything that it sees against for its interests.
And what do you think an outcome of a Greece-Turkey deal would look like? As far as I understood, you're saying the negotiations would favor the Turkish side, at least in this amount of notice. But what do you think the end result of such negotiations would look like?
Well, we cannot know that for sure, of course, because we are not oracles that rest in the mountains and see the future. But we can see through this angle, like through the lens of realism on international relations, Turkey has won this bet that it was making against Greece. They were saying, okay, this is Eastern Mediterranean. We also have a coast. We have the longest coastline to Mediterranean, and we have a part in the resources that is located in the Eastern Mediterranean. And it has proven that the international relations framework that we have today is insufficient to determine the conditions for this to arise. But I think Turkey, with its increased military might, has proven that Turkey will be able to enforce its thesis in the region. They won't be able to just like they wouldn't allow for themselves to become a bystander of any dispute, because like before it was different. In the 70s, in the 80s, it was different. Turkey did not have much of a force to enforce whatever it was saying, but now it does. So this creates a different set of circumstances for which our international relations understanding has to evolve to. Because like before we had the international hegemon, but now we see that like US is not very much interested in meddling with like Middle Eastern disputes, etc. That might change after the elections, but I don't think it will. So this creates, again, as we talked before, a framework on which like regional powers like Turkey can work on. So they will be increasingly trying to increase the area in which they are influential in.
Mm-hmm. And moving on to yet another East Mediterranean situation, the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus is basically turning one of its territories, Marash, or known as Varosha, again into a tourist destination. What is the background on this? As far as I know, it is a territory in between the southern Greek Cypriot state. Can you give us a brief background on the situation there?
So Varosha, as it's known in English, was a bargaining chip for Turkish side. It was under invasion of Turkish military, and it was always kept in a non-residential zone, in which no one was let in, and they were always providing this as a bargaining chip while they were trying to negotiate under the UN or with the Republic of Cyprus. But now they seem to be fed up, or at least that's what they're trying to show to the international community, that they'll be opening it up to Turkish people. This place was the touristic hub, touristic center of Cyprus, the whole island of Cyprus before. It was dominated by Greeks, and what the UN offered before was to open it as a UN zone and re-establish the old ownership rights. That would mean essentially to give it back to Greek side, because all the owners of the entertainment industry in Varosha was comprised of Greeks. So now the reason that they're opening it, I think it also has to do with Turkish politics, but it also has to do with the Cypriot politics, because there were going to be elections. It has happened today, the elections in Cyprus, in Northern Turkish Republic of Cyprus. And they were trying to show the electorate that, like, okay, we are engaged in the process of re-establishing ourselves. Because before they were saying there might be some negotiations with the Southern Cyprus or with the Republic of Cyprus, but now we are taking the helm, we're taking the initiative to change things, and actually it has created a lot of backlash. So a part of the coalition in Northern Cyprus has resigned, has taken off from the coalition, but that didn't help much in the elections, because it seems now at the time of this recording that the ruling government is going to be the same. But yeah, it has to do with like all these factors, because of like Turkey has more military might. It is more growing more and more assertive in the region, and Cypriot government is keeping up pace with Turkey in that regard. And also another interesting thing that I realized this week, Varosha, as far as I understand, and my guesses are, comes from the Hungarian word of Varosh. That means the vicinity.
Yeah.
We also use that word in Turkish to denominate like the suburban areas, like low-end suburban areas. And it seems to me that it's coming from that word as well. It's interesting, but that's Varosha. The word Varosha is not used in Turkish, even though we use the word Varosh in Turkish, but they use it in Greek as well. It's an interesting finding.
So, to recap what you said, the Turkish government of Northern Cyprus wants to open this city/district for international tourism?
I don't know for sure. I don't think they also have a plan in mind, because the infrastructure in Varosha is unusable basically, because like it was a very well-working hub of tourism in 1970s. But if you live any place without attention for 40 years,
yes, of course,
that infrastructure is going to rot. And that's basically what happened with Varosha. Like, to make it as a hub for international tourism once more, you need a lot of investment. And I do not think the Northern Turkish Republic of Cyprus has the resources to do so. It might be able to do so with the Turkish help, the Turkish money. But I'm not sure if they have a concrete plan of what to do with it. I think, from what I understand from the first week of them opening, is that they're basically trying to do it as a show to international community. This was meant to be as a message to someone or something. I think they're trying to show it to them, either to the electorate of Northern Cyprus or to the Greek side in Cyprus, the Republic of Cyprus. They want to advance to another point, and they will be assertive in their position to do so. And again, this again updates us on the take on Turkish policymaking in the contemporary times, that Turkey might be able to actually solve the Cyprus issue this time with this sort of new approach. With this sort of new approach, if we'll be able to solve the Cyprus problem, we might be able to like eliminate one of the biggest systemic reasons against our EU accession. Okay.
All right, and that was all from Turkey Courier this week. Erkin, do you have any concluding remarks?
Well, yes, we have been doing this. I think this is the third week, right, Saad?
Yes, this is the third episode.
So we would really appreciate some feedback. We have been sharing it on our networks. I do not know for sure how many of you actually do not speak Turkish, and how many of you are actually like really interested in Turkey but don't speak the language and you just want to know more. So please let us know of what you think, of your background, etc., and how this podcast is helping you in any way, if it's helping at all, with the email address that we provide below in the description.
Mm-hmm.
And so you would know, as you would know, with any podcast or any kind of media output, we are in desperate need of feedback all the time. We want to tailor the experience, tailor the content towards your experience, toward what you would like. So we will be very much glad if you would let us know what you think and let us know what you would like to hear more or hear less about. But thanks a lot for listening, if you're listening this far on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, everyone. See you next week.